Good evening, Missy. Welcome to the Laughing Monkey Music Show. How are you doing tonight?
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, you have an excellent book you're coming out or working on right now, and you're actually working with Mark Weiss. So, if you could start talking, the book is about Kevin Dubrow and the years you've spent with him. Um, you could start a little bit on the book itself, a little summary.
Yeah, basically the book itself is it's called Keep On Rollin'. My fan club years with Kevin Dubrow and Quiet Riot. And the reason why it has Kevin's name in Quiet Riot as opposed to just Quiet Riot is because technically Quiet Riot originally was with Randy Rhoads, and that was what I call Quiet Riot, the Randy Rhoads years or the era.
Mhm.
And I started to see them near the very tail end of that. I was a little younger than the normal crowd. And then Randy went with Ozzy, and I had just started seeing them, and Kevin was starting all over. So when he was starting all over, he started his own band under his own name, Dubrow, and he performed for a couple of years, a total of 107 shows, sometimes 2 a night, and I went to 105 of those shows. And so I was kind of on the ground floor of his solo situation. And most of the songs and a lot of the songs that were written by Kevin, and I have demo tapes of a lot of those songs, ended up being on the Quiet Riot albums once they were Quiet Riot. I call them the mental health years.
Yeah.
And Kevin got the record deal, and then they changed the name to Quiet Riot. So technically, this is leading up to the record deal and when mental health came out. And I was running his fan club and promoting to get people to the show for the first couple of years on his own. And then when he got the record deal, Kevin asked me to be the official fan club of the Quiet Riot Squad, he called it. And then I was there when the album boomed. And I got to deal with a lot of the fans and run the fan club for the big push there, the big, opening of the band. So that kind of covers Kevin trying to get the record deal and the shows and all the different experiences that I went through. So it's from my perspective, fans' perspective.
How far does it go to the story with him? Do you go to the end or?
Well, it basically it's pretty much straightforward from 79 up until I would say 84. And then after that, there's information about the relationship, with Frankie and with Kevin. Later on, it was more sporadic, but it all kind of comes together, and then it addresses Kevin's death. It addresses, and then while I was writing in the book this year, Frankie passed. And so honestly, it has a solid timeline. But then after that, it's like how we kind of grew apart because, once they're big, my job was pretty much done. And social media was the thing. And it wasn't about having a fan club president. That's just like a thing of the past now. But I had some pretty fun adventures with the fans, and it was fun to see this band get huge and working with Kevin and with Frankie. So I'm very grateful. And honestly, I wrote pieces of it over the years, but never really sat down to finish it. And that was at the urging of friends who loved my different fan stories. But 2020 came around and I said, I'm home. So I worked on it every day until I finished it. So it ended up a good thing about 2020 this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good time for me, creative time for everybody.
Yeah.
So you ended up getting involved with Mark, though. How did he get involved with the book? And we'll go back to more of your stories, but.
Honestly, with Mark, it's interesting because everybody knows Mark. Everybody knew Mark. I didn't know Mark. Turns out Mark ended up becoming friends with Kevin and the band right when they were starting to hit, like I think during the US festivals when he first saw them. And he was there, from what I understand, photographing Ozzy, and then he saw Quiet Riot, and then that started from there. I actually finished the book, all the text of it, and then I was looking for a cover for the book. Now I have my own photos of Dubrow, and I have those sort of things to put inside the book, but they aren't, Mark caliber by any means. So I'm looking on the internet and I'm trying to find a particular photo. I wanted a picture of Kevin wearing this necklace that he had, which was a 3D microphone stand of his microphone stand in gold with a little diamond. And I gave that to him as a birthday gift. Yeah. And I gave it to him as a birthday gift right when he went on to play Solid Gold TV show. And he wears it all over the place. So I thought, oh, God, I'd love to have a great photo of that. And I found a photo online and it ended up being Mark's. So I contacted him and I thought, oh, he's kind of expensive, but maybe he'll give me a break and I can use it for the cover. Well, Mark didn't just say yes or no, or here's my price. He said, well, what are you working on? What are you doing? And he just kept asking questions by email. So I finally just picked up the phone. I'm West Coast, he's East Coast. And we started talking and he asked me more about the project. And we realized we were like, again, ships passing in the night. As I was pretty much launching that part, he came in and started when they got really big and we just never met each other. And that in my memorabilia, I have 8x10 photos that he took that Kevin signed to me in my collection. So that was really cool. And so Mark, so let me think about this for about a month. He just launched his book, literally in June, and we talked in June. And a month later, he contacted me again and said, I have a bigger vision for this book. I think we should put some of my photos in that would accompany your stories and then get Ron Sobel involved. And Ron Sobel is the original Quiet Riot Randy Rhoads photographer and one of Kevin's best friends. And Ron was like, yeah, sure. So I've got two phenomenal photographers who took pictures of Quiet Riot that I got to select photos from along with some of mine to create this book.
That's incredible. I mean, it just fell together. It's perfect. I mean, if you were sitting around and said, what would really be great for this book? I get my hands some great photography. I can get some great photography to work with me and be part of the book, and not be something I have to pay for. I wonder if that could happen. That's really fantastic.
I joke around with people, and I tell them, look, I plan to put this thing out on Kindle, a little, not even a hardback. I was just going to sell it to a few friends, call it a day. That was the original plan. But once Mark got involved, and then he told me what he really wanted to do, it occurred to me that there's some kind of divine intervention or orchestration here, because Kevin Dubrow did everything on a huge scale. And I don't think he would want this book to be tiny. I think he'd want it to be, representation of his personality. So I kind of laugh over that possibility.
Well, it definitely is better and you're gonna hit a bigger audience too, I would have been one of those guys that picked it up on Kindle because I've read off the rails. I read everything, so I would have been the one person that would have got it on Kindle. But the idea of having these great photos makes it that much better.
Yes.
And the few people I've mentioned that part of the photography part too, and with this part, they're like, this sounds fantastic. They're excited. Just a few people have mentioned it too. Just the concept of it. It's
well, there's some stories in there. One of them I talk about the filming of Mental Health, which was actually a college nearby, and Ron Sobel has some behind the scenes photos of that video shoot, their very first video shoot, and I was able to put them in the book because I talk about the video shoot. If you see behind me, you can see a metal mask. That there is just the regular metal mask. It looks just like the metal mask on the album. But for the video shoot, the college made masks, the people who were at the college, and they passed them out to the audience. And then after, we were supposed to return them. And of course, I returned mine like a good little, but my sister didn't. And so we don't know what happened to those masks 40 years ago. However, I have the one she kept. So this is actually from the video shoot.
Oh, nice. What is it made? Is that actually metal? No, it's a plastic.
No, it's plastic. Has a little bit of a crack down here, unfortunately. Yeah. But this is the actual mask that they passed out to film for the audience to wear at the end, because the whole premise was Kevin went, metal. And so at the end, the audience all has these masks on, and we're all metal too. Well, and then we all returned it. But isn't that great? So this is the original video shoot mask, and it's the only one I know of its kind. So.
Oh yeah, that is fantastic. Does your sister know you have it?
Oh, she loaned it to me. Besides, we're like, well, she went to everything with me. She was my constant shadow for this entire thing. So
how did you find time? We'll start back at the 105 shows. How did you find time?
Well, part of it is I was a teenager.
That's a lot of shows for one person.
Well, 2 a night can add up.
Yeah.
And I was that dedicated. I just loved the band. I mean, I was a huge Queen fan, and I loved the Queen fan club. And I thought they were so quality, and I loved way they did it. And I always said, God, if I ever loved a band, I would love to run a quality fan club and connect with the fans. So when I saw them perform, and that's it, laser focus. I didn't have a car. I actually took the bus to a fast food place, and I worked at a fast food restaurant, Arby's. I saved all my money, all my babysitting money, and I used that for discount tickets. And I basically went to every single show. I'd pay someone $50 and book them a month in advance to make sure I didn't miss one show. And I only missed two because I was underage. Now, first of all, if you have his back, he is beyond loyal, more than anybody I've ever met in my life. He will protect you, and he is loyal to you. And he appreciates when you're a good person. If you're doing stuff and backstabbing or talking, outside of both sides of your face, he doesn't care for that. Another thing about Kevin is that he pays attention to everything. So if you think you can get away with doing something that's kind of, nasty, and he won't find out about it and hold it against you, you're also wrong in that area. So if you're a true blue person, you're very straightforward with him, then there's absolutely zero problem. Now, keep in mind, I always attribute the success of our relationship is that Kevin and I are very similar. We're very businesslike. He wanted a record deal. He booked gigs. He wanted to find the right people in the band. It was simply a laser focus. And I loved the music, loved the band, and I was laser focused on wanting them to get a record deal. So there was really no reason to not get along. As far as him talking about other bands and whatnot, again, I'm similar to him. I'm very loyal to very few bands. And I personally have ideas about bands I don't like. I'm not on the world stage, so no one cares if I do or don't like a band. Kevin was. And so therefore, he had a whole different level of scrutiny than somebody who's not on the world stage. So I actually like the fact that he had his opinions, because he wasn't just this PC person that says what's expected of him. And basically that, to me, turns into kind of like a non-personality. And I know he regrets some of it, and it hurt his career.
Well, that was the point. Being so laser focused in business, it's like any of us at any of our jobs, you wouldn't go in and being like just bad mouthing other people at other places. It's just not good business.
It isn't.
Not making him saying he has to love these people either. A lot of bands they're like, you know what? I don't know anything about them, and they just don't have to talk about them. You're not being a different person by not talking about them. So to me,
you're more diplomatic than most, and that's just it.
Yeah.
You're talking a guy who's in his early 20s too. A lot of this stuff, or mid 20s, a lot of this stuff he had to learn clearly. And he probably made those kind of comments about bands before he was big and didn't realize this was going to be something he had to stop. And he learned too late. And anyone also knows Kevin, you can't tell him what to do. You can't say, hey, you really should, you just can't do it. And, for better or worse, that was his life. And I would never have recommended him to do anything different, because he had to learn the hard way for him. But again, as far as a person who, if you put that aside, he was a loyal person. He gets jealous very easy. He gets jealous over band members, or like, for instance, I want Randy in my band, or I want Frankie in my band, that kind of thing. He even was jealous if I went and saw other bands locally. Why do you want to go see them? Why? That's just who he is. But he is charismatic. He's funny. Yeah. And he's talented, and he's got a voice, and he writes great songs. And the first few albums had a lot of the songs he wrote as Dubrow, and I have demos of them under different names, maybe different lyrics. In fact, the book's name is Keep On Rollin', which is a Dubrow song, my personal favorite song. And it ended up being on a Condition Critical, but he changed the name to Party All Night. So that's what the world knows that song as, but I know it as Keep On Rollin'. And I'd asked him, why did you change the name and the lyrics of that song? He said, I really like Keep On Rollin'. I wanted to be on an album, but I had to change the name and the lyrics because it fit with the theme of that particular album. I'm like, okay, and it sounds great, and the video's fun, but Keep On Rollin' is still my favorite. I have a little sound clip that I play on my computer all the time, because to me, that's the original version. So Keep On Rollin' was definitely going to be the title of the book.
That's a good title. How different is it from that song? Is it just the title's different, or?
Well, it's kind of like same thing with like No More Booze and Mental Health. I'm sure you know Mental Health was originally a song called No More Booze, and Carlos Cavazo wrote it in the band
Mhm.
Snow.
Yeah.
And that one there was like No More Booze, What a Drag, whereas, Bang Your Head, Mental Health will drive you mad. So the phrase is slightly different, but just different lyrics and different
Okay.
title.
I was trying to imagine that song, those lyrics in my head. I love hearing different versions of songs when bands come out and they're like, oh, they're the first version of this and they change it around. I love that.
Uh-huh.
That's really, really cool. So when you first started, so you said you caught the very first version of who was in Quiet Riot when you first saw them?
Kevin, Rudy, Randy, and Drew Forsyth.
And
And my
they
first
were,
show,
yeah.
I was 16 years old, August 30th, 1979.
Wow.
And they played a rock and roll night at a disco. They had a rock and roll night for all ages. So I was able to get in because, no one liked disco back then. Disco sucked.
So yes, they turned, yeah, they turned fast.
Uh-huh. So they booked the club as a rock and roll night to get a new audience, and they, turned off the disco ball. And my girlfriend worked next door at a water park. I used to go there and, the water park and look at all the lifeguards, and we're like,
Mhm.
that discotheque that we went run by is going to have a rock and roll night. Let's go check it out. And that's when I first saw them play.
And that was it, right?
That was it. That was it. And they cut the set short because Randy blew out a monitor. So the next day we called, it was called the Star Baby. And we called the Star Baby and said, who is that band? Where do they play? And they're like, look, they play in Hollywood. This was the Valley. And, they said Rudy Rhodes and Randy Sarzo. They didn't even know the names properly. And so we called the Starwood and the whiskey and the places they were playing. And that was it. I was hooked. I was going to see them. And even to this day, 40 years later, I remember that single devotion of like, oh, this is it. This is it. I'm not deviating from this path.
Well, there's three members of that band, besides, I mean, or two that really continued on being huge, with Randy and Rudy on top of, so you get to see them at a certain time too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's another thing. I mean, to have seen Randy play numerous times, it's a lot of people be like, really? That's awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Randy was my favorite at first. I mean, Randy is Randy, my God. Of course, when I first saw him, I just thought, how can this petite man make this guitar sound? How? And I was such a fan of Randy in the very beginning that I took photos of him and I showed my mother, who sewed a Randy Rhoads vest and bow tie for me. She just faked it, the black and white. And there's a picture of me in the book wearing that with my little, fluffy hair. And I'm 16, my eyes are all wild, like I'm just a teenage kid. And I wore that to one of the shows. And during the solo of Randy on the stage, he noticed that I had his exact outfit on, vest and bow tie, even though the bow tie kept getting crooked because it was kind of faked. And during that show, during the solo, he kneeled down in front of me and kept pointing to his cheek. And I didn't know what he meant. And my friends are all like, pushing on me. And I'm like, I don't know what he wants. And I realized he was saying, give me a kiss on the cheek, because he saw I was dressed just like him. So he was dripping sweat, and I gave him a kiss on the cheek, and he kind of smiled and got up and he finished his solo. So that was a pretty cool moment for a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah, that's really fantastic, actually, to have that happen.
Yeah.
How many shows did you see before it went to Kevin went solo, before the band kind of dissolved?
You know what? I'd have to look. Probably only a handful. I saw them at the Star Baby. I saw them play at the Whiskey and the Starwood after that. And it wasn't too long after that they split. Randy left. And so that's when I started the Dubrow thing started. And that's when I started really counting all the rest of the shows. So I came into the tail end of that. And that's why everything shifted to a relationship with Kevin.
Well, I imagine it had been a hard time. I mean, because you probably came in a good time for him to be there,
Yes.
but in a
Yes.
bad time because, well, if Randy left and did Ozzy, then of course Rudy followed suit, right? That went, I think.
Yes.
On the timeline, I'm not familiar with the drummer, I'm sorry to say.
Drew Forsythe at the time. He was the original drummer, and he stuck with Kevin in the beginning.
Yeah, I'm sure he was great because there was never any, bad musicians in any version of the band. So
Yeah,
so I'm sure he's fantastic. So I'm not even doubting how good he is. I just didn't know who he is. But at that point, even describing how you say how Kevin is, would feel emotionally. Apparently he's very emotional driven. Losing Randy and then Rudy is got to be like betrayal. You want your guys to do better, but God, that would be a jealousy thing, especially because they're getting an album deal.
I would think.
So, but you being there to kind of help support him, probably he may not have realized at the time to help buffer against the rocks there.
Maybe, and actually, when I started working with him, it really started out as pen pals.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I remember pen pals.
Yeah, I have in my book. I think I put in about 4, maybe 5 of his handwritten letters. Because what I did is that I just looked him up in the phone book, and I decided I would just take photos of the band, make duplicates, and then I would send him copies and write him a letter. And I was happy with that. And he started writing back, and he thanked me. He'd tell me the new people in the band, or I wrote a whole new song, and could you pass out more tickets? I'm not sure if this band London has a following. It's this kind of a thing going on. And he knew I made a Dubrow shirt because there was no merchandise back then. So I went one of those kiosks in the mall where you can just get a shirt and put some letters on it. It said Dubrow, white on black. And one time out before a show at the Starwood, we'd get there early. I had to be in the front. So I would literally get to any venue anywhere from an hour to 2 hours ahead of time with my friends and be in front line, getting ready to get the best spot. That was what I did. And I had my Dubrow shirt on, and we had been riding back and forth. And he did also give me a call first, and he told me over the phone that Randy left the band at that point.
Oh.
And he called and said, "Do you know who this is?" And I'm like, "No." And he says, "You don't know who this is?" And I'm thinking, I don't know who this man is. I'm a teenager. And he started singing "Keep On Rollin'." I'm sorry, "Slick Black Cadillac." And I went, "Oh my God, Kevin." And he says, yeah. So that's when he told me about the news. But honestly, he was surprisingly optimistic. He said, "I'm going to start my own band. Drew and I'll work together for now." And he said, "I'm going to call it Dubrow. That way I can call the shots." And he seemed very pleased with that. There's no group name now where he has to bend anybody's will. That's my thought. And so that's how that started. And then finally, one night when we were standing waiting for the show to start, and again in front of the line, Kevin got out of his car for a sound check, and he saw me. He walked over and pointed to my shirt and said, "You must be Missy." And I said, "You would be right." And I introduced him to my friends, and that was my first meeting with him, and wearing his jeans and suspenders for a sound check. And then it was dusk, and the photograph's 40 years old, but I do have that photo of our first meeting in the book. So it means a lot to me, even though it's not a great photo, but it was the very first time I met him.
Well, that's pretty powerful. I mean, I think him calling you when that happened,
I know.
It's a pretty huge thing. I mean,
yes,
him reaching out, clearly he was kind of like, he had something to share emotionally, and considering he didn't even know you, I mean, he had to share, he had to get out of him somehow.
Yes, exactly. And you know what? Honestly, he was, I know he probably had his, guys can be cool with each other and talk about, "Oh yeah, this happened," or whatever. But when we talk about something, he would be giddy like a teenager. Yeah. Guess what? So maybe I was a safe outlet to show that extra excited side about things that maybe may not have been so cool to express in front of other guys. And that's just a theory.
No, you probably put in like a good cheerleader, not like, behind him, and a support system that, when you hit the bottom or you have a good idea, it's good to have somebody behind you going, "Yeah, you can do this,"
Yes.
And you were a fan that was there before. So you would be the evidence of continuing on with him, that he's still, make it legit to continuing on. I think it validated him.
Yeah, you got a lot of good insights. I really do. And he's emotionally driven. A lot of that is so very true. And, rather than hiring a corporate person to run a fan club, which they could have done, he wanted an authentic fan to run the fan club. And I was honored when he said, I want you on the back of the album, your name, and I want you to run the fan club. And I'm like, I'm so honored.
So what kind of duties as it got bigger? Like how to change? I don't know nothing about a fans club, so.
Well, believe me, you wing it.
Well, there probably weren't a lot of rules, were there, at first?
Really, yeah, really, fan club is not much different, I think, than social media, in the sense that when I was doing it unofficially, I called the original fan club, I called it Dubrow Rocks, and I had a rubber stamp made for my return envelopes, and I would just, anybody I could get to go, they became on my mail. I called it a mailing list. That was the original thing, and then I also used to go to the large venues like the Forum, and this is before they were signed, and when like Scorpions would play or something, and so I dragged my friends down to the massive Forum parking lot. We'd wait in the car, and then when all the people went inside the venue to see the Scorpions, we'd get out of the car, and my little flyers that said Dubrow mailing list with Dubrow Rocks on it, I would walk around with my friends and we put them on all of the cars. So I was trying to gather people from these large rock venues, and I'm sure a lot of them probably came back to their car and said, what the heck is a Dubrow? But there were some people who said, oh my God, I saw those guys, in a club. And they would fill out the form and send it to me. That was the unofficial list until the album came out. And then they actually had the Quiet Riot squad. And then people around the world would buy the Mental Health album, and they can actually write. And then they had a PO box. And, started out with a handful of mail, and I'd go once a week with my sister. But once I started opening for other bands, the mail was out of control. And we'd have to go to the PO box twice a week. And my sister would lift her jacket up and we'd dump mail in it to carry it to the car. There was so much mail.
Wow. I can imagine. That's what I'm saying. I imagine like once they hit and you were doing that, your duffel bags would be like, this is not a one person thing anymore. It's just like a production office.
It is. And I lived at home, and my sister lived at home. So we had our own bedrooms. And what I did is that I gave her a little portable typewriter and these little cards, and I made a little system. Again, I'm very businesslike, even as a teenager. And she would open the mail and she would type up the person's name and address or whatever she had. And then she'd open up the mail and lay it flat for me. And then she would give me a stack of letters, and then I would read them. And I had the band answer some questions for me ahead of time, like a little questionnaire, their favorite food, their favorite color, because that's the stuff that they all wanted to know, favorite band and that kind of thing, their birthday. And if any fan asked an excessive amount of questions, my sister would use that cheat sheet to type up all the answers, and I would review it, and then I would sign my name, and we'd return the letter to the fans. And I would write a monthly newsletter, and I would tell them how they're doing on the charts. I would tell them where they're going to play. I was on the mailing list for their shows, for their tour manager would send it to me, and I would let them know they're playing in your area. And that's basically what you would do, is you're basically keeping them informed when there is no social media. And
how long did that go?
Once it got really big, I did that probably the beginning of the album came out in March. It was really out of control by November. And what happened was I was getting a lot of requests for actual fan club packages, which is what we did not have. They'd say, do you guys have any kind of membership packages where I can join and I can get things, So I went to their manager, Warren Etner, and told him what I was seeing and what the feedback was. And I said, I would love to put together a fan club package for these people and charge them $10 a package. This is 83 still. And Warren loved the idea, but he really didn't think that we would get these people to spend $10 whole on this. And I disagreed. And he said, I'll tell you what, he says, make a package up, do the research on what you want to put in it, and $10 a package. And if you get 100 orders, let's meet in 1 month and we'll go into production. We will open the checking account, we'll deposit the money, we'll create the items, and we'll fulfill them. I'm like, okay, you got it. So again, on a mission. So I went back and I designed a package and a membership form that had Uncle Sam. I went to a Army recruit store and got a poster. And then I had someone put the metal mask on it. And then I had it say Quiet Riot Wants You, which is one of the posters that you get as a perk. I had someone redesign it because I had to do it by memory. And I sent them out, and the response was fantastic. But then a month went by, and I made an appointment with Warren, and I got to his office, and he was on the phone. He hangs up. He's very calm. He says, "Let me guess. You didn't get 100, did you?" And I said, "No." So we got 400. I plopped an envelope on his desk with all the checks for 400 membership fan club requests in 1 month. So he was in shock, and that was great. However, it didn't quite pan out the way I'd hoped it to. The band was getting so huge, and he was running everything. So as the touring was going on and the dates and having to manage the band, and here I bring this whole new problem to his desk, which is we got to get all these fans now with their packages.
A good problem.
Yeah, but he had a hard time, I think, with it. I think he was just too busy with the band, and that's where the major money is. And of course, tour merchandise is a lot of money, and probably where they wanted to put their resources, or he did anyway. Months went by, and people were writing me, and they're like, we never got our fan club package. The check didn't clear. Did you get it? And I'm like, oh God, I'm starting to feel miserable now because I couldn't fulfill it because I'm waiting for us to take that next step. And finally, after about 6 months, Warren called and said, look, I've just been trying to figure out how we're going to handle this. And I said, I understand. And he said, what we're going to do is we're going to hire a company, Fan Club International. And he goes, I want you to write the newsletter still, but they're going to do all the heavy lifting for you. And, because I was like, 20 years old, I was young still. And he says, you're going to kind of oversee it. They'll make the merchandise, and they're going to have to return the checks because they're stale dated. And we're just going to have to relaunch it now that we know there's a desire for this. And that's pretty much how it was going to go. It never really quite went that way. I saw one letter go out from that company, and they rubber stamped my name, which they should have let me write. But that's okay. And then nothing happened. I think in August of '84, one more letter came out from them. And it was no longer from me. It was more generic, and they just rubber stamped the guys' names at the bottom of the letter. So they took the personal touch out of it. I'm kind of bummed they did that, but it is what it is. They were getting too big, and maybe and after that there was nothing. There was no fan club. They just decided not to do it, and I don't know to this day why. And I saw Warren Ettner at Kevin's funeral, but it really wasn't appropriate to say, hey, some years ago, whatever happened. It's like, it is what it is. And social media came along, and it really wasn't, that's no big deal anymore. But so I was there for the big burst, the big delivery of the band. That was my time. I don't know if you know this or not, but when Kevin was in his teens, he used to fancy himself a photographer, of large acts, Yes. And he took photos of like Rod Stewart and Uriah Heep, apparently, and Steve Marriott and that kind of thing when he was a teenager before he decided to become a singer. And Ron Sobel, his best friend and photographer, and the mother are going to allow me to have a handful of those photos that Kevin did as a teenager. And we're going to add a bonus chapter of Kevin's photography at the end of the book.
That's really fantastic. And so many hands to give it the stamp of approval that it's really probably like one of the better books out there that you're going to get of biography of Quiet Riot. I mean, of true, honest opinions where everyone's kind of, it's great. I think it's funny. So he's a photographer. That kind of explains maybe the attraction with Mark too. I mean, Mark was his rock star.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so nice too, because the photos that we were looking at are just, first of all, they're stunning. And it's not like a coffee table book where you're just looking at a lot of photos and there's a lot of timeline information, like then this happened and this happened. It's really coming from more of, one show we saw this, or, we had to sneak into this venue because we were underage. It's more from my perspective of that in pieces. So it's not, kind of a dry, boring, straightforward. It's more about the interesting stories or the fun stories, or, just that kind of a chronological order that is in instead.
And I think, Mark, you have tickets or pictures for the concert or flyers, and you have like little pieces of stuff in there.
Yeah, so I have some memorabilia that, Kevin's letters, like I mentioned.
Mhm.
I do have some Dubrow photos because apparently Ron Sobel stopped being their photographer and became a lighting guy for them. So he doesn't have Dubrow photos. Mark was not there during Dubrow. He started when Quiet Riot was out as mental health. So
Mhm.
there are some photos that I took, and I was always in the very front row. Now I had a little, instant camera, but there's still some pretty nice photos, and he's right there in your face because
Wow.
I was in front. So
Well, apparently those are the best photos that are out there right now because
yeah,
no one
I
else
was
has.
right there. I'm right there to get the sweat. So it's nice to be able to have that. I always had a rule when I'd go to those shows. I would take some photos,
Mhm.
put the camera down, and then I would rock out because I was an air drummer girl in the front, hair everywhere, and playing the drums and singing along. And I didn't want to ruin my experience with photo taking. You know what I mean? I wanted to be part of the experience of the music and close my eyes and just rock out.
Mhm.
And that's what I did. And then I'd stop, take a few photos, and then put the camera down again because there's definitely a difference between witnessing a situation and experiencing it. And I definitely wanted to experience the music because that's why I was there.
Well, I want to
Okay.
thank you for being on the show tonight, and we're gonna really put the links and everything, and people go out and buy this book. Okay, I want to thank you.
Thank you so much for your help, Sean, in spreading the word.